Hello, I'm Joshua, and I'm an INTP, and first and foremost I would like to say thank you for viewing this video and subsequently visiting my channel. The topic of this video will be on INFPs, a revisit. And in this video, what I would like to do is delineate the ideas, extend certain concepts, and concretize things in a way and get them out of the more nebulous, abstract framework that I put them in. As I've decided, I will not delete that first video, as many people have come to enjoy it, so I think that would be rather mean on my part to do that. But I will still insist on making this video, as there is some things I would like to say very really to explicate the more peculiar and apparent aspects of the INFP nature. It is first to reiterate this, that they are qualitative in their vantage point, as qualitative means explicitly this, that meaning precedes objects, as in they abstract objects or what they can orientate and relate about the objective world and events that take place within it in terms of the structures of meaning that are made emergent to them by way of existential information. Existential information is information that is concerned with affirmation or negation of emotional or emotive properties, as in the INFP, being a dominant introverted feeler, is self-referential, as in they have a very strong mooring and connectivity to the base anthropomorphic structures that underpin the elements that give us the ability to feel and be reactive to the environment in ways that are non-verbal nor non-rational in terms of procedural mandates, as in they are the very things that cause us to be responsive, as in light causes our eyes to dilate, and that gives an emotive experience as we are met by something suddenly in the brush, and that causes us to stiffen with fear, as in the base embodied patterns of recognition that the mind comes with, and the centers of the brain that are more concerned with the very vigilant and watchful and broadly associative and connective modes of being are at the heart of the introverted feeling of cognitive function, and very really it gives the license and the creation of a priori ontological systems of values for the INFP, as in they're moralist and they are existential phenomenologists, as in they're concerned with meaning and experience and the relation between existence and experience and how meaning is made manifest or derives from that. Now, very really, I said in that video that they create themselves, and I said this in another video on introverted feeling, that introverted feeling is a function concerned with the creation of self. Now, in terms of the INFP, there is something very interesting because of the constellation of all the other functions, as in their tendency to be moral agents is not the traditional school of thought, in such a way as the INFP will draw peculiarities out of situations, events, scriptures, bodies of knowledge that other people are not going to do necessarily, because those things are interacting with the sort of amorphous wave-like net or matrix or framework that's going on around them. I don't know really what to call this thing, but it's to say that the ability to be reactive by way of the emotions is something that is orientative in nature. As in, if you are hungry, it sets off base innate patterns of behavior in the brain to go and satisfy that. If you're aroused, sexually aroused, you are going to try and satisfy that. There are emotional stimulations, and there is more than hungry. If you're happy, typically when you're very excited and you're happy, you try to find other people. You try to go out into the world, and you tend to be more exploratory, and you tend to take greater risk, as in there's this tendency to go and impose self on the world when people are happy. There is a lot of and when you're aggressive, you typically seek to satiate that aggression in some way, and will be rewarded or punished in certain ways by your brain, and how you take and express that aggression. Very really, it's just to say that the INFP, I use the wave-like amorphous things as a metaphor, as in to say that these embodied things and these base action potentials, they use those things to decide where is left and right, where is right and wrong, and where they should go. That is the base palette of what they're drawing from. And that's why they will pull out peculiar aspects to things in their exploration, as morality will not seem to be such a linear, classical view of it in their eyes, as in they say they know what it means to be human, and they will look at very dark, what we would consider dark or strange aspects to a thing, as in necromancy, or tarot cards, or things that are to rational thought, or to the more conservative in nature, are reprehensible. They will be very interested in those things. They will look, even though there is this saying from introverted sensing by way of the larger collective sphere not to look, the midlife and the greater exterior life that they draw their experience from, though that is there, introverted feeling, because it's linked up to the base anthropomorphic structures, can sniff out aspects of humanness or our humanities in all sorts of forms by way of their NESI axes and introverted feelings bent to find meaning, as in they're meaning-seeking creatures and individuals, and they look for patterns of meaning, and they try to revivify elements of existence in reality to better express those patterns and those manifestations of meaning, as in they are dying saviors and the recapitulative agents, as that's something that they're concerned with. So INFPs are misunderstood and alienated in a lot of ways, because they do have this tendency to go hunt for meaning. They're very much on the hunt for meaning, and I've said it before, they're little meerkats, and so they're fairly vigilant, and they're hunting for these things. The ability of extroverted intuition to see the rather, I would say, invariant and consistent elements to things can cause them to go to places where other people will just freaking scratch their head. It's because they're like, I don't understand why you have to stare at that dead carcass. Well, at least I'm drawing that from an experience, because I have an INFP friend, and there was a dead animal on the road, and they were fixed on stopping and looking at it and taking it in. And it disturbed them even when they were taking this in. But I asked them, why is it that you will continue to look at this, even if it disturbs you? And they could not voice explicitly what was going on. But she said, because it means something. And I can't, it means something. And she was trying to figure out what it means. And she was looking at something in a way I'll never look at it. Because when I stop by, I think, oh, how much has the carbon, how much carbon is left in the thing? What does the stench mean about how long it's been there? Like, I'd be better at being Sherlock Holmes and solving what killed it and how long it's been dead and things by way of the empirical facts and the logical notions that sit at the helms of things. but they are investigators in their own rights, as they are astronauts of meaning. They are not. They can be even psychonauts not psychonauts in sort of psychopathy, but in not psychometric, but psychodistorting drugs per se, as in they like to find meaning, and that has a very, very, very large range to them, and it's how their exploratory nature presents itself, and very really the way that they're misunderstood a lot of times by people, as in people will not understand oftentimes why they're interested in the things that they're interested in, or why certain things communicate the things that they communicate to them, but they are starting from places of meaning, and the things about the aspects that give us the most, I would say, salience to the intrinsic and the innate landscape of the subjective experience is not something that is privy to most people and most types outside of dominant introverted feelers. That's not something we see, but their world is rich with these things, and these bundles of meaning, if one will, is very much apparent to them in possibilities, as these possibilities are made emergent to them and their everyday life, and they are insistent on exploring these things and indulging in these appetites, and their insistence in exploring these things and their indulgence in these appetites can very really leave themselves alienated and outside of the system, and it's a place that most INFPs find themselves. Now, it's to say this too, that they are the creators of self, and they're the creators of self because they are the most concerned with the self and its relation to meaning. So an INFP asks essentially, as they are moral agents or they're ethical agents, what is it that brings life and what is it that disavows it? As in, what are the things that affirm human existence in terms of humanity and its most primordial, and one could say innocent and even pure aspects? What are the things that affirm those things, and what are the things that negate those things? And they look to create complexes of action and behavior that leads them seemingly to what they think those things are. Whatever they gather and whatever they assess, they try to go to those things and pursue those things. They very really do. They're dogged in their pursuits, very really. And it's how they create the self and where they create the self from, because they are making rule books and they are making lists. They're making codified systems in terms of what's appropriate, what's acceptable, how one should view this, how one should think about this, what are the many ways we can think about this thing in order to maintain some sort of homeostatic balance between what's good and what's necessary. It's like the INFP is taking and being the shamanic entity of self, very really, as in they are in some ways communicating with archetypal expressions and then orientating themselves towards those things and trying to get other people to wake up in some respects and orientate themselves to those things too. And that's where the realness and the rawness comes from in them, and their hunt for authenticity, and why they will call you out if they think you're being inauthentic. It's because an INFP communicated this very poignant, I would say, not poignantly, but accurately and beautifully, insofar as she says that there is a music to the universe. There is a music to life, as in it's a lyrical and there's a rhythm per se, and we are so in tune with that lyric and that rhythm that when something causes us to miss the beat and miss the note, it is cringeworthy. And when they see another person do the same thing, Do not think that cringe ain't going off in them, because it is. And they are shepherds of self. They're shepherds of self, as in they're concerned with their own self, but it's very really something a part of INFPs that though they're individualistic and idiosyncratic, they have a tendency to not think that it's weird. Like, they see differences and they know uniqueness. But at bottom, they do not think themselves any very really different per se than some, like, it's hard to say in some respects what it is. And they don't explicate these things, but I see it in their actions per se as this, as in they think that the point of life in terms of their interaction with people is relationality. And they think that most people want to be relational and most people want to preserve their life. They're willing to take their mandates and their morality out into the world and share it with others, because at bottom they think that people essentially have the same motivations and the same things that make up their existence, and so they want to protect those things as they find them sacred and precious by way of their own intrinsic motivators nonetheless. But this sort of inversion to self leads to a very interesting inverse proportionality to having a harmonic sense with the great and all everything that is around them. As I've said this before, that their introverted sensing, their extroverted intuition, and their inferior extroverted thinking causes them to be plugged, their self, and the very idiosyncratic way it is, plugged up to greater, broader, and larger things that are extended outside of themselves, as they feed off of these things and very really create and revivify themselves in it, as if they smile at you and are being kind to you, your reciprocity in that interaction is not necessarily affirming their emotions, but affirming a quality of a hope in the ability to be relational, or that people can understand what it is that they're showing or expressing or displaying. They are consistently doing this reiterative dance and are trying to explore and push what it means to be human to its very limits, because they are trying to find the best expressions and most generative and eternal ways that this can be, and so far as the internality of good. And they're doing that in their arts, as their arts are communicative in their nature, as in this thing of life is all but one game of expression, responsibility, and communication to the INFP, as they are bounded to be authentic and they are bounded to express some things and continually be the arbiters and the champions of self and what it means to be human. And that is the analysis of the INFP, and hopefully that is more delineated and a better extension and concretization of all of the other abstract things I was saying in the previous video, and hopefully you found that interesting. Thank you for watching.